increased physical activity. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, how many of you would say that you are physically active right now? Now, how many of you would say that you are more active now than you were as a kid? It is no secret that times have changed and that people are not as active today as they were a short time ago. A major point of contention in current day America is the importance, or lack thereof, of physical activity in schools. Many of us have preconceived notions as to what physical activity is, which feeds our mindset as to whether it is important or not. When thinking about physical activity, many people will go straight to exercise. But physical activity, according to the definition laid out in Promoting Physical Activity, is the type of activity that has physical benefits. This is slightly different from physical fitness, in that physical fitness is the physiologic response or capacity of a system that is affected by the physical activity. It's a response to physical activity. An example of such systems is body composition and body fatness. Overall body fatness and body composition has become an issue in the American population, especially in populations of children from younger generations. Oded Bar-Or wrote on such things in Health Benefits of Physical Activity During Childhood and Adolescence, stating that some of the benefits of physical activity include decreased body fatness. The Physical Activity Guidelines for Americans from 2018 also showed that when engaged in adequate physical activity, there was a 25 to 35% decrease in the likelihood or risk of developing type 2 diabetes mellitus. This battle of increased body fatness and body composition is not simply in children or in adults, but it is widespread across the entire country. In their study on obesity trends of American children, Patricia Anderson and Kristen Butcher note that as near as the 1970s, significantly lower rates of childhood obesity were observed than current, where only around 5% of children from 1971 to 1974 were labeled as obese, while 1999 to 2002 saw an increase to nearly 15% in the same category, and the trend continues to rise. This trend is not consistent with many other areas of the world. Thomas Rayner wrote in his study on type 2 diabetes in children that the prevalence of childhood type 2 diabetes, which is the adult form of diabetes, saw the United States having 12 for every 100,000 children in this category of obese, whereas Europe as a whole only saw 2.5 children for every 100,000 in the same category. The obesity epidemic that we are facing does not start and end with adults, but in children. By engaging in adequate physical activity, the risk and prevalence of diabetes and obesity can decrease, as seen in the Physical Activity Guidelines for Americans. Aside from decreasing risk of diabetes and obesity, there are other health-related benefits that physical activity can bring on that would be remiss not to mention. Of these benefits, the Physical Activity Guidelines for Americans lists the decreased risk of other cardiovascular disease as the top modifiable benefit, meaning that certain practices can lower the risk of these diseases. Bar-Or also cited decreased blood pressure and increased bone mass density as potential benefits of physical activity. Bone mass density plays an important role in the future of a person as a preventive measure for conditions such as osteoporosis and other bone conditions. In addition to obesity, preventing conditions such as these have a trickle-down effect, where Richard Deckelbaum said that either obesity or non-obese will trickle down and follow children into adulthood. So the positive effect that can be instilled as a child will follow them into adulthood, and vice versa. If these conditions can be decreased in childhood, the positive effect will follow them into adulthood. This calls for modifications to be made to decrease prevalence of these sorts of conditions to help ensure a healthier future America. Additionally, mental health is tied to physical activity and has been shown to aid in increasing overall mental capacity in children. Benjamin Sibley and Jennifer Etnier show that there's an effect size of 0.32 for the positive association between physical activity and improved cognition in children. This effect size means that there is a strong positive effect of one variable on the other, in this case, physical activity and mental capacity. But what does this have to do with schools? Aren't there physical education courses all the way through high school? Doesn't elementary school have recess breaks? To answer these questions briefly, yes, but. The National Physical Activity Plan Alliance compiled a report card on health and activity of children and youths from 2018, just a couple of years ago. Here they assert that young children aged 6 to 11 engage in physical activity for an average of 88 minutes per day, more than double the amount seen in adolescents, where 12 to 15-year-olds engaged in 33 minutes a day and 16 to 19-year-olds only at 26 minutes per day, whereas the recommendation is at 60 minutes each day. This is partly due to recess not being offered at the older ages in school. Another factor is that only 6% of high schools required physical education courses 3 days a week. Pair this with the fact that only 35% of high school boys and 18% of high school girls were engaged in more than 60 minutes of activity per day, which is recommended. This is a visible deficiency that must be addressed. As a school board, your interest is invested in the welfare of students, the progress of the institution, but most importantly in the health and safety of your students. Due to this, I implore you to increase allowances and access to physical education classes at the middle and high school level, as well as breaks throughout the day at the upper levels of school for physical activity to be had. I was a physical education teacher for a short time, and the district I was in required physical education all the way from kindergarten through high school graduation. As a result, the students were healthier, happier, and were able to perform at a high academic threshold. Schools need access to adequate physical activity for the well-being of students, and we need students to be healthy for a successful and healthy future.